Somewhere out at the edge of our solar system, there is a planet where it rains diamonds. Not sparkly little chips either. We are talking about real diamonds, falling like hail through skies filled with wind so strong it could rip a house apart in seconds. This is not a movie. This is a real planet, and it is sitting out there right now, spinning in the freezing dark, hiding a secret so wild that scientists almost did not believe it themselves. And the strangest part is, we only found out because of one lucky flyby that will probably never happen again in your lifetime. So what in the world is going on inside this cold blue planet? Stick around, because the answer is stranger than anything you have seen in a movie. The planet nobody really knows. Let's start with something simple. If someone asked you to name the planets in our solar system, you could probably do it without much trouble. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and then that last one way out at the edge, Neptune. But here's the thing. Out of all those planets, Neptune might be the one we understand the least. And that is not because it is boring. It is because it is so incredibly far away that studying it is almost impossible. Think about how far Earth is from the Sun. Now picture Jupiter, which is way past Earth, way out there in space. Neptune is not just a little bit farther than Jupiter. It is about 5 times farther away from the Sun than Jupiter is. To put that in a way that actually makes sense, if you were driving a car at a highway speed and it took you 1 hour to reach Jupiter, it would take you 5 more hours just to reach Neptune after that. It is not close. It is not even in the same neighborhood. Because it sits so far out, Neptune gets almost no light from the Sun. We are talking about roughly 1,000 times less sunlight than what we get here on Earth. If you stood on the surface of Neptune, and you obviously could not because it does not really have a solid surface, but if you somehow could, the Sun would look like nothing more than a slightly bright star in a sea of blackness. Not a warm, glowing ball in the sky, just a tiny speck of light lost in the dark. This is also why humans did not even know Neptune existed for most of our history. You cannot see it with your naked eye no matter how clear the night sky is. Ancient civilizations who mapped the stars with incredible detail, who tracked Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn for thousands of years, had absolutely no idea Neptune was even there. It stayed hidden in the darkness the entire time. Think about that for a moment. People built entire calendars around the movement of the planets. They named days of the week after them. They built massive stone structures lined up with certain planets in the sky. And this entire time, one giant blue world was sitting out there, silently orbiting the Sun, completely invisible to every single person who ever lived before the year 1846. Every ancient king, every early scientist, every person who ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there, none of them had any idea Neptune even existed. It makes you wonder what else might still be hiding out there today, waiting for the right tool or the right idea to finally reveal it. It was not until the year 1846 that humans finally found it. And get this, we did not even find it by looking through a telescope first. We found it with math. Here is how that happened. Scientists had been watching Uranus, the planet right before Neptune, and they noticed something strange. Uranus was not moving the way it should have been moving. Its orbit around the Sun kept wobbling slightly, like something invisible was tugging on it and pulling it off course. It was almost like Uranus was being pulled by an invisible hand that nobody could see. A mathematician named Urbain Le Verrier decided to figure out what was causing that pull, using nothing but numbers and equations. He calculated exactly where an unknown planet would have to be hiding in order to cause that wobble in Uranus. Then he sent his numbers to an observatory and told them where to point their telescope. And when they looked, there it was, Neptune, sitting almost exactly where the math said it would be. That is honestly one of the coolest moments in the history of science. A planet was discovered not by someone spotting it in the sky first, but by someone predicting it had to be there before anyone had ever laid eyes on it. Think about how strange that is. Somebody sat at a desk, wrote out a bunch of numbers on paper, and pointed at a spot in the night sky, saying an entire world was hiding there. And they were right. Once they finally spotted it, scientists needed a name for this new planet. Since it glowed with a deep blue color, they decided to name it after the Roman god of the sea. That is where the name Neptune comes from. To really understand how big of a deal this discovery was, you have to remember just how enormous Neptune actually is. It is not some small rock floating out in space. Neptune is about 4 times wider than Earth. If you could somehow hollow out Neptune and start dropping Earths inside it like marbles, you could fit more than 50 of them in there. It is an absolute giant. And yet, because it sits so far away, it still looked like nothing more than a tiny dim dot, even through the most powerful telescopes of the time. So now we know Neptune exists, and we know it is incredibly far away. But knowing a planet is there and actually understanding what it is like are two very different things. For over 100 years after it was discovered, all we really had were blurry images through telescopes. We knew it was blue, we knew it was big, but that was about it. Then, decades later, humanity finally got a real look, and what we found out changed everything we thought we knew about this planet. Before we get into that, though, if you are the kind of person who loves finding out the strange hidden secrets of space, things that sound made up but are actually real, this channel is going to be your new favorite place to hang out. We are not here to bore you with a bunch of complicated science talk. We just want to show you how wild our universe actually is in a way that is easy and fun to follow. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because next time we are heading to a planet that is so light, it could actually float on water. Now, let's get back to Neptune, because this is where the story starts to get a lot more interesting. The only visit we have ever had. In the year 1977, NASA launched a spacecraft called Voyager 2. Its job was to fly past the outer planets of our solar system and send back pictures and data. Nobody at the time fully understood just how special this mission was going to become. You see, in order to visit all of these outer planets in one trip, Voyager 2 needed the planets to line up in a very specific way. This kind of lineup only happens once every 175 years or so. It is an extremely rare alignment, and NASA managed to launch their spacecraft during the small window when it was possible. If they had missed that window, we might still be waiting for a mission like this today. To put that in perspective, the last time the planets lined up in a way that made this kind of trip possible, nobody on Earth even had electricity yet. There were no cars, no airplanes, no telephones, and the next time this exact alignment happens again will not be for well over another century from now. So this was not just a lucky opportunity. It was closer to a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-several lifetimes, chance that NASA managed to catch at exactly the right moment in history. Voyager 2 used the gravity of each planet like a slingshot, flying past Jupiter, then Saturn, using the pull of each one to launch itself further and further out into space. It took years and years of traveling before it finally got close to Uranus and Neptune, the two planets we know the least about, sometimes called the ice giants. Just think about how long this journey actually took. Voyager 2 launched in 1977, and it did not reach Neptune until 1989. That is 12 full years of nonstop traveling through empty space, with nobody on board, no way to fix anything if something broke, and no second chances. Whatever happened out there, happened. There was no calling it back home for repairs. Scientists on Earth simply had to wait, year after year, hoping their little spacecraft would survive long enough to reach its final target. And it almost seems unfair when you think about it, because by the time Voyager 2 finally reached Neptune, some of the scientists who had helped design the mission back in the 1970s had already grown into completely different stages of their careers. An entire chunk of a person's working life passed by, while this spacecraft was still traveling through the dark, quietly making its way toward a planet nobody had ever seen up close. When Voyager 2 finally reached Uranus, scientists were excited, but a little confused by what they saw. Uranus looked almost completely calm. No big storms, no dramatic weather, just a smooth, pale, quiet ball of gas sitting in space. It was strange, but it also made some scientists wonder if maybe the most exciting parts of our solar system stopped at Saturn. Maybe the outer planets were just going to be quiet and boring. Then, 3 years later, Voyager 2 arrived at Neptune, and everything changed. Keep in mind, this spacecraft was not exactly loaded with fancy modern technology. It was built decades earlier, using equipment that would look ancient compared to what we have today. If you compare the computer inside Voyager 2 to the phone sitting in your pocket right now, your phone would win in almost every single way. Less memory, slower processing, and far simpler cameras than anything you would find in a modern device. Yet this simple little machine was about to make one of the greatest discoveries in the history of space exploration. It had cameras that could take pictures using different types of light, sensors that could measure temperature, and tools that could pick up things like magnetic fields. It could also detect radio wave emissions, which are basically invisible signals given off by powerful forces in nature, kind of like how your radio at home picks up invisible signals floating through the air. That is basically it. Old cameras and some sensors sent across billions of kilometers of empty space, running on a power source that was slowly fading the entire time. But even with that simple equipment, what Voyager 2 saw as it got closer to Neptune was something nobody expected. The first thing scientists noticed was the color. Neptune was not just blue, it was a bright, electric, almost glowing blue, unlike anything else in the entire solar system. It looked less like a planet and more like a giant marble made of pure sapphire, sitting alone in the blackness of space. But the color was only the beginning. As Voyager 2 got closer, it became very clear that this was not a calm, quiet planet like Uranus had been. Not even close. This was a planet at war with itself. The fastest winds in the entire solar system. Here is a fact that sounds completely made up, but is 100% true. Neptune has the fastest winds of any planet in our entire solar system. Not just a little faster either. We are talking about winds that can blow at speeds close to 2,000 kilometers per hour. To put that into perspective, the strongest tornado ever recorded on Earth had winds around 500 kilometers per hour. Neptune blows past that number like it is nothing. At their absolute strongest, the winds on Neptune can move faster than the speed of sound. Imagine standing outside during a normal windy day here on Earth, where a strong gust might knock over a trash can or rattle your windows a little bit. Now imagine wind so powerful it could pick up a car and send it flying like it was made of paper. That is the kind of force we are talking about on Neptune. And it is not just wind either. Voyager 2 spotted a massive storm on the surface of the planet, a storm so big that it was roughly the same size as our entire planet Earth. Scientists named it the Great Dark Spot. Inside that storm, wind speeds were measured at over 2,400 kilometers per hour. That is faster than most fighter jets can fly. Just stop and really think about that for a second. There is a hurricane out there, the size of an entire planet spinning with wind faster than a jet fighter, and it has probably been raging for who knows how long, completely unnoticed by humans, until one lucky flyby caught it on camera. To really understand how insane that speed is, think about the fastest trains humans have ever built. Some of the quickest bullet trains in the world can hit around 600 kilometers per hour on their best day. And that is considered an incredible achievement of engineering. Neptune's winds move about 4 times faster than that, all the time, with nobody flying the train and nothing stopping it from ever slowing down. There are no mountains to break up the wind, no buildings to slow it down, no oceans to calm it. Just endless open sky wrapped around a planet, letting the wind build up more and more speed with absolutely nothing in its way. You might be thinking of another famous storm out in our solar system, the Great Red Spot on Jupiter. That storm is also huge, also spins around, and has actually been raging for hundreds of years without stopping. Neptune's Great Dark Spot worked in a similar way, spinning counterclockwise just like Jupiter's storm. But here's the strange part. Jupiter is much closer to the Sun than Neptune, and it is also a much bigger planet with way more energy pumping through its atmosphere. It almost makes sense that Jupiter would have a massive, powerful storm. Neptune is smaller, colder, gets barely any sunlight at all, yet somehow its winds beat Jupiter's by a wide margin. That is like watching a small, quiet kid at school somehow out-arm wrestle the biggest kid in the entire building. It does not add up unless something else is going on that we cannot see just by looking at the surface. And here is another wild part. Storms on Earth eventually run out of energy. Hurricanes form over warm ocean water, and once they move over land or cooler water, they lose their fuel and start to fall apart. But the storms on Neptune do not seem to work that way. The Great Dark Spot that Voyager 2 spotted was not a quick, passing storm. It was massive, stable, and clearly powerful enough to keep going without any warm ocean feeding it. Which brings up an obvious question. If storms need energy to survive and Neptune barely gets any energy from the Sun, where is all of that power actually coming from? So now we have a real mystery on our hands. Uranus, which is right next door to Neptune in space, was calm and still. But Neptune, sitting even farther from the Sun, colder, darker, and receiving even less sunlight, was somehow the most violent, wild, and active planet ever recorded. That does not make any sense at first glance. Usually wind and storms are caused by heat. When warm air and cold air mix together, that creates wind. The bigger the difference between hot and cold, the stronger the storm. So if Neptune is farther from the Sun and colder than Uranus, where in the world is all of this extra energy coming from? It is definitely not coming from the Sun. Remember, Neptune only gets about 1,000 times less sunlight than Earth does. That is nowhere near enough heat to create storms this powerful. But here is where things get really strange. When scientists studied the temperature of Neptune's clouds, they found something they did not expect. Neptune was actually slightly warmer than Uranus, not by a huge amount. We are talking about a difference of maybe 10 degrees, but when you consider that Neptune is about 50% farther from the Sun than Uranus, that tiny difference in temperature is actually a massive clue. If Neptune was following the normal rules, it should be much, much colder than Uranus, not warmer. Something inside this planet is creating its own heat, all on its own, without any help from the Sun at all. To understand how a planet with barely any sunlight could somehow be producing its own internal heat, we need to go somewhere. Most people never think to look. We need to go inside Neptune itself. The secret buried, deep inside. Let's take a trip beneath the clouds of Neptune, layer by layer, to figure out where all of this hidden heat and energy is coming from. The very outer layer of Neptune is made up of thick clouds. These clouds are a mix of gases, mainly hydrogen, helium, and something called methane. That last one, methane, is actually the reason Neptune looks so incredibly blue. Methane gas soaks up red light from the Sun and bounces back mostly blue light instead, which is why the whole planet glows with that bright blue color from far away. If you kept traveling downward, past those clouds, you would eventually reach a thick layer sometimes called the mantle. This part of the planet is not solid, and it is not really liquid either. It is more like a thick, slushy mixture made of water, ammonia, and more methane, all blended together under intense pressure. Imagine the thickest, slowest moving slush you can picture, except stretched across thousands of kilometers and squeezed by unbelievable force. And then, right at the very center of Neptune, there is a solid core. This core is made of rock and metal, and it is actually about the same size as our entire planet Earth. But even though it is a similar size to Earth, it is around 50% heavier, because everything inside Neptune is packed together so tightly. Here's the important part. All of that weight, all of that gas and slush sitting on top of the core creates an insane amount of pressure. The deeper you go inside Neptune, the more that pressure builds and builds, crushing everything tighter and tighter together. Imagine taking an elevator ride down into Neptune. At the top, near the clouds, things are still somewhat normal, just very cold and windy. But as that elevator drops lower and lower, the walls around you would start to feel like they are squeezing in tighter. The pressure would grow so strong that it would eventually be able to crush solid steel like it was made of paper. By the time you reach the middle layers of the planet, the pressure would be so extreme that nothing built by humans could survive even a second down there. Now remember how we mentioned that Neptune's clouds contain a lot of methane? Methane is made up of something called carbon. And carbon does something incredibly strange when you squeeze it hard enough. It turns into diamonds. That's right. Scientists believe that deep inside Neptune, the pressure becomes so extreme, somewhere around 7 million times stronger than the pressure we feel here on Earth, that the carbon inside the methane gets crushed and squeezed until it forms actual solid diamond crystals. Just sit with that for a second. Somewhere, right now, deep inside a planet billions of kilometers away, there might be diamonds forming out of thin air, or more accurately, out of thick, crushing gas. But it does not stop there. Once these diamonds form, they do not just float around and stay where they are. Because they are solid and heavier than the slushy material around them, they begin to sink. They fall downward, deeper and deeper into the planet, like rain falling toward the ground. Except this rain is made of pure diamond, falling through a thick ocean of freezing slush instead of air. Scientists actually believe this happens so much, and the material below is so incredibly dense, that these diamonds may eventually reach a layer where the liquid itself is thick enough for chunks of diamond to float on top of it. Almost like ice floating on water, except made of solid diamond chunks the size of rocks, drifting on an ocean of liquid carbon. Now here is where the mystery finally gets solved. As all of these diamonds fall and sink deeper into the planet, moving through that thick, slushy layer, they create friction. And just like rubbing your hands together quickly creates heat, all of that diamond rain falling and rubbing against the material around it creates a massive amount of heat deep inside Neptune. That heat does not just stay buried, though. It slowly rises upward, moving from the deep interior of the planet all the way up toward the surface. And when that heat finally reaches the outer layers, it slams into the freezing cold of outer space, creating the exact kind of temperature difference needed to generate wind. Massive amounts of wind, faster than sound wind, storm the size of Earth wind. So there it is. The reason Neptune has the wildest, fastest, most violent weather in our entire solar system is because deep inside its core, diamonds are literally raining down through the planet. And the heat from that process is powering storms strong enough to tear apart anything unlucky enough to be caught inside them. It is important to mention that scientists cannot actually see this happening. Nobody has ever sent a probe deep enough into Neptune to watch diamond rain with their own eyes. This idea comes from studying pressure, temperature, and the materials that make up the planet, and using that information to figure out what is most likely happening underneath the surface. But even though it is a theory, it is one that fits perfectly with everything we have observed, and most scientists studying Neptune today believe it is very likely true. What makes this theory even stronger is that scientists have actually tested a small version of it right here on Earth. Inside special laboratories, researchers have used powerful lasers to squeeze tiny samples of material that contain carbon, recreating the same kind of intense pressure found deep inside Neptune, just on a much, much smaller scale. And when they did that, tiny diamonds actually formed in a matter of seconds. That experiment is a big reason scientists feel so confident that this same process, just on a massive scale, is happening naturally inside Neptune right now. And Neptune might not even be the only planet doing this. Some scientists believe a similar kind of diamond rain could be happening inside Uranus too, just in a smaller, quieter way, which would help explain why Uranus, while calmer than Neptune, was still slightly warmer than expected as well. As wild as all of this sounds, the diamond rain is not even the last surprise Neptune has waiting for us, because floating around this violent, stormy planet is a moon that should not even exist there in the first place, and it is currently living on borrowed time. The moon that does not belong. Neptune has 16 known moons circling around it, but one of them stands out from all the rest by a huge margin. Its name is Triton, and it is by far the biggest moon Neptune has. In fact, it is one of the largest moons found anywhere in our entire solar system. At first, Triton might not seem all that unusual. It is just a big, icy moon, orbiting a big, icy planet. But once scientists studied the way Triton actually moves, they realized something was very, very wrong. Almost every moon in our solar system orbits in the same direction that its planet spins. It is like they are all moving together, working as a team. But Triton does the exact opposite. It moves in the reverse direction compared to Neptune's spin. Scientists call this a retrograde orbit, and it is incredibly rare, especially for a moon as large as Triton. Small moons moving backward is not that big of a deal. Those are usually just tiny space rocks that got randomly captured by a planet's gravity at some point. But Triton is not tiny, it is massive. And out of every large moon in the entire solar system, Triton is the only one that spins backward compared to its planet. This one strange detail tells scientists something incredible. Triton was probably never actually born as a moon of Neptune at all. On top of the strange orbit, Triton is also one of the coldest places ever measured in our entire solar system. Its surface sits at a temperature so low it makes Antarctica in the middle of winter feel warm by comparison. And even with temperatures that extreme, Voyager 2 spotted something nobody expected. Triton actually has active geysers on its surface, shooting streams of gas and dark material several kilometers up into the sky. Even though it is one of the coldest, quietest looking moons out there, something underneath its icy crust still has enough energy to blast material out into space. The leading idea right now is that Triton used to be something completely different. It was likely once a dwarf planet, similar to Pluto, just wandering through space out near the edge of our solar system. Scientists believe it may have actually been part of a pair, two icy dwarf worlds orbiting around each other, kind of like two dance partners spinning together in space. At some point, that pair wandered too close to Neptune. And Neptune, being the massive planet it is, used its powerful gravity to rip that pair apart. It grabbed onto Triton and pulled it into orbit, trapping it forever, while flinging its former partner off into deep space, never to be seen again. Picture two friends walking closely together, holding hands, when suddenly something huge and powerful yanks one of them away, pulling them off in a completely different direction while flinging the other one into the darkness alone. That is basically what scientists believe happened out there, except instead of two friends, it was two icy worlds. And instead of a person doing the pulling, it was the raw gravity of an entire planet. We will likely never know exactly where that other dwarf planet ended up. It could still be drifting somewhere out in the freezing darkness beyond Neptune, forever separated from the partner it once orbited alongside for who knows how many millions of years. So, in a way, Triton is not really a moon at all. It is a hostage, a dwarf planet that got captured and forced into orbit around Neptune against its will, and it has been trapped there ever since. This actually connects to something else pretty interesting. There's a large ring of icy objects way out past Neptune called the Kuiper Belt. This is where Pluto is located, along with hundreds of other similar-sized icy worlds. A big reason Pluto lost its official status as a planet is because scientists realized it was just one of many similar objects out there, many of which have been shoved around and rearranged by Neptune's powerful gravity over billions of years. Triton and Pluto are actually thought to be very similar in size and makeup, almost like long-lost twins that ended up with two very different fates. It is a strange thing to picture. Somewhere out past Neptune, there could be a whole family of icy little worlds that once had a sibling just like Triton and Pluto, quietly drifting along together, never expecting one of the giant planets nearby to reach out and completely change their path forever. Neptune has spent the past 4 billion years slowly rearranging the entire outer edge of our solar system, flinging some objects farther out into the darkness and pulling others in close, and Triton just happened to be one of the ones that got pulled all the way in and trapped for good. But here is the twist. While Pluto continues quietly orbiting out in the Kuiper Belt, Triton is not so lucky. Because it never really belonged in orbit around Neptune in the first place, its orbit is not stable. The two gravity fields fighting against each other, Neptune's pull and Triton's own resistance to it, are slowly dragging Triton closer and closer toward the planet. That means Triton is currently spiraling inward, getting closer to Neptune bit by bit as time goes on. It is an incredibly slow process, so slow that, from our point of view here on Earth, Triton looks like it is sitting perfectly still in its orbit. But scientists tracking its path over the years have confirmed the moon truly is drifting closer, just a tiny bit at a time every single year. At some point, far off in the future, Neptune's gravity will finally become too strong for Triton to survive. There is a certain distance planets have where anything that gets too close simply cannot hold itself together anymore, because the difference in gravity pulling on the near side versus the far side of an object becomes too extreme. Once Triton crosses that line, the moon will be ripped apart, torn into countless pieces of ice and rock, shredded the way a piece of paper would tear apart if you pulled hard enough on both ends at once. But that will not be the end of the story either. All of those broken pieces will not just disappear, they will continue circling Neptune, spreading out into a massive ring system, one that could end up being just as big, or possibly even bigger, than the famous rings we see around Saturn today. Just imagine that for a second. Billions of years from now, Neptune could be sitting out at the edge of our solar system with giant, beautiful rings circling around it, and every single piece of those rings would once have been part of a doomed moon that never should have been there in the first place. We obviously will not be around to see that happen. It is expected to take billions of years. But it is a wild thing to think about the next time you look up at photos of Neptune, this glowing blue planet with violent storms, diamond rain falling deep inside it, and a doomed moon slowly spiraling toward its own destruction. And here is the part that makes all of this even crazier. Everything we just talked about, the diamond rain, the fastest winds in the solar system, the storm the size of Earth, the secret about Triton, all of it comes from a single flyby by one spacecraft, using outdated technology that happened once and has never been repeated since. We have not sent anything back to Neptune since Voyager 2 passed by all those years ago. There have been ideas floating around for future missions, something called Neptune Odyssey being one of them, which would involve a spacecraft orbiting Neptune and Triton for years at a time, and possibly even dropping a small probe into the planet itself to gather more information before eventually being crushed by the pressure. Scientists behind ideas like this hope a closer, longer look at Triton could help confirm whether those active geysers really are a sign of something interesting happening underneath the icy surface, and a longer study of Neptune's storms could help prove once and for all whether the diamond rain theory is exactly right, or whether the truth turns out to be even stranger than what we currently believe. For now, though, that mission remains just an idea, sitting on paper, waiting for enough funding and enough time to actually get built and launched. Missions like this take years of planning before they even leave the ground, and then more than a decade of travel time after that before they would reach Neptune at all. So realistically, we might not get a real up-close look at this planet again for several more decades. So for the time being, this glowing blue planet sitting at the far edge of our solar system remains one of the biggest mysteries in space. A place where wind blows faster than sound, storms rage bigger than our entire planet, diamonds might be raining down through crushing pressure right now as you watch this, and a stolen moon is slowly counting down the days until it gets torn apart and turned into rings. And honestly, that is what makes space so incredible. We are not talking about some made-up world from a science fiction movie. This is a real planet sitting out there right now doing all of this in complete silence, far beyond anything we can see with our own eyes. If this blew your mind even a little bit, do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a video like this one. We have got a lot more strange secrets from our solar system coming your way. Before you go, here is a question for you. If diamonds are really raining down inside Neptune right now, would you ever want to send a probe down there to try and grab one, even knowing it would probably get crushed before it ever made it back? Let us know what you think down in the comments. And if you want to see something just as wild, go check out our video on Jupiter, the biggest planet in our entire solar system, where we found out some secrets that even surprised us.